It's Friday, August 1st, 2025, and our new weather pattern has officially arrived. And here's today's severe weather outlook, and we can see that our new weather pattern is going to be a lot of calm out here in the central and northeastern US, with a lot of activity being out here in the upper plains and southeast for at least the next couple of days. Today, our main risk is going to be stretching from northeastern New Mexico all the way up into South Dakota, then out here in the southeast, stretching from Georgia, South Carolina, and even into the southern portion of North Carolina. And other areas which could see some strong storms would be stretching back into the northwestern corner of the Rockies, and then even along much of the southeast Mississippi River Valley and southern plains along a stationary front. Now, today's risk is going to be mostly fueled by the conditional threat for some 60-mile-an-hour damaging gusts, and these will span both of our entire marginal risk areas today. And then our hail risk is really only going to be present out here in the upper plains, and this is going to be for the conditional threat of possibly any hail between 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter. Now, the SPC has once again not outlined a specific tornado risk area, but I do think if there were to be a tornado today, it would be out here associated with a mesoscale convective vortex in parts of Wyoming, Nebraska, and even South Dakota. And then our change in our weather pattern is even going to be evident in our temperatures. Areas which haven't seen some scorching hot temperatures, specifically out here in the central, Midwest, and northeastern US, are going to be experiencing some very wonderful weather for the next couple of days, experiencing a lot of mid-70s feels like temperatures. But unfortunately for our friends down here in the southeast, lower Mississippi River Valley, and even back into Texas, there is still going to be widespread mid-100s feels like temperatures, unfortunately. But on a different note, the National Hurricane Center is not expecting any development of any tropical systems for at least the next week. But because it is August, I do definitely think we will start to see a ramp up in activity out here in the Atlantic. And then for our flash flood risk today, the highest risk is going to be present out here in the southeast, stretching most of the Carolinas. This would be for the conditional threat of anywhere of widespread 2 to 3 inches of rain in this slight risk, with a couple of isolated blotches of even 5 inches. We have another slight risk back here in northeastern Texas. This looks pretty conditional at the moment, but still be prepared for anywhere between 2 to 4 inches of rain. Then we have a large marginal, which we have seen the past couple of days, which spans all the way from the northern plains down through the upper plains, southwest, southern plains, lower Mississippi River Valley, and back in the southeast. And for this area, there would just be the conditional threat of 1 to 2 inches of rain today. And here's what the radar could look like later today down here in our southeastern risk area, specifically in the Carolinas, is where I do think that highest risk of severe weather is going to be present today. And this is going to be along a stationary boundary with possibly a couple of embedded low pressure systems. Then there's going to be a lot of westerly flow, and it looks like these storms would be initiated by peak heating around the early to mid-afternoon, and they would mostly pose that threat for damaging gusts. And the threat with this would pose all the way back into the early morning hours Saturday before these storms push off into the Atlantic. And here's what the radar might look like in the upper plains later today. We can see that we're going to see some storm initiation around the mid to late afternoon hours, pretty much along our upper plains convergence zone, then also along a remnant mesoscale convective vortex out here in South Dakota. And then these storms would pose the threat for mostly some hail, anywhere between 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter, and some isolated damaging gusts. But I do think there could actually be potentially an isolated tornado threat with this remnant mesoscale convective vortex out here in South Dakota, and possibly along the outflow it releases back into our main cluster of storms back here in Wyoming. I do think there would be the isolated threat for potentially a weak spin-up tornado here as well. And then these storms would last into the evening hours today as they push eastward, and then they would mostly die off by very late Friday night. And something to note is that when that low-level jet kicks in this region around the evening hours, I do think there could actually be a non-zero chance for tornadoes pretty much along our entire cluster along the upper plains. And there would also be the elevated threat for some damaging gusts and some larger hail during that time as well. And a couple of areas which could see some strong storms would be just pretty much anywhere in the southeast and eastern Texas, because there is going to be a lot of westerly flow, and then there is going to be a remnant boundary across this area today. And then the same would go back here in the northwest, where there is going to be potentially some troughing and a stationary front along this area, which could bring some strong storms to the region as well. And the main threat with this would be some high gusty winds. And then here are 500 millibar winds. These help to bring forcing for our storms and also some organizational shear. And we're going to see that we are not really going to have strong flow pretty much on any of our risk areas. The only thing is that we're going to see a lot of westerly flow across our main risk areas today. So storms are more likely to be initiated by a couple of remnant boundaries and peak heating today rather than synoptic forcing from above. There are also a couple of high pressure systems which could bring some more organizational shear to our storms today as well. And here's a look at our environment out here in the upper plains. We're going to see some pretty straight photographs with quite a bit of organizational shear and even some weak wind bearing. So definitely some organized storm clusters out here today. We also see some very high low level lapse rates, a pretty moist environment for this region at 60 dew point, then an environment seen anywhere between 2,500 to 4,000 cape. So just very conducive conditions for severe weather out here in the upper plains. A couple of more things to notice are that we do have quite a bit of dry air loft, which would help to support that threat for some strong downdrafts. And that's going to be accompanied by a 1,600 downdraft creep, which is pretty high. Then our relative humidity is also going to be pretty low, which also helps with some evaporative cooling. Our precipitable water is also 0.88 inches, which is pretty low. So potentially some photogenic storms out here in the upper plains today. Then our 3 cape is going to be 73, and because our lowest cloud level is actually not going to be super high, this environment I do think could see a mix of high base storms and lower base storms, but because some storm bases could be lower, I do think there is a non-zero chance for a couple of weak spin up tornadoes in the upper plains when that low level jet kicks in later in the evening. But the main threat would be some damaging winds and some hail, potentially even larger than 1.5 inches in diameter, because we do have quite a bit of cape up here near our freezing level. Then our mid-level lapse rates are going to be extremely high at 9.2 Celsius, decreasing per kilometer. Then of course that's going to be coupled with our bulk shear. So definitely some strong updrafts today and some pretty large hail actually, even anywhere possibly being 2 inches in diameter. And here is our weather sounding up here, that mesoscale convective vortex in parts of South Dakota. And immediately we're going to see why there is going to be a higher tornado risk in that area, although it's still going to be pretty low. Our photograph is definitely more curved for that. And our shear and helicity in the low levels are going to be much more conducive of potentially a weak tornado along that mesoscale convective vortex as well. Then here's our environment in our southeastern risk area, and we're going to see a very typical southeastern environment. It's going to be extremely moist, almost an 80 dew point, and actually very unstable at potentially over 4,000 capes. So just very supportive of severe weather today out here. A couple other things to know are going to be a extremely high precipitable water at 2.14 inches. That is going to fuel that threat for some potential flooding, and also could bring some stronger downdrafts and that damaging wind threat. And that's going to be coupled with a 1,200 down cape. And then our 3 cape is actually going to be nearing 200, which is another reason why that threat of severe weather is also going to be just elevated out here in the Carolinas and Southeast today as well. Then our low level lapse rates are going to be pretty high, which would also bring that threat for some damaging winds today.